From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, mate. Welcome to Wednesday night. Now, there is no surprise that many Australians don't trust their institutions. And today, we've got an absolute reminder about why people don't. You name the survey, it's always there, the trust in government, trust in media. All of it seems to slide, particularly and ever faster after the events of 2020, when you were locked in your homes, and if you dare fight back, the police might turn up and arrest pregnant women in their pyjamas. Well, only 38% of respondents to a survey told people at the time that they trusted institutions. That was a fall of 5 points. Those numbers came up from just last year. And part of that is because there seems to be a failure of accountability. Nobody is held responsible for terrible things that take place. University of New South Wales put out a paper, again, just a couple of months ago. What often underlines these breakdowns in accountability is a lack of transparency. What do we talk about all the time? A failure to consult. What do we talk about all the time? An insidious normalisation of dubious practices. Lots of clever university words for people always trying to pull the wool over your eyes and tell you it's not wool. There's a problem with your eyes. These failures are exacerbated when coupled with a response by the perpetrators or their agents which declares a belligerent denial of wrongdoing. See the behaviour of the Prime Minister of recent days, the ministers, when it comes to the people who should be locked up or at the very least be monitored but aren't and go on to be accused of pretty vicious crimes. Or a lame expression of regret, the footballer's apology that we know they don't mean. And so begins the slide from accountability to impunity, where impact is played down, sanctions are scant, and business continues as usual. Now, there is no greater example of no accountability than the failures in and around hotel quarantine in Victoria from 2020 on. The National Cabinet said that hotels were the best place to put people who had come back from overseas, and they were to be guarded by the police or members of the ADF. But Victoria had its own decision, and that was to hire private security guards, and you know what happened from there. Every single case for a significant period of time could be linked back to the failures of hotel quarantine. The result being that Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. Now, stunningly, the people of Victoria decided to re-elect the government that did that. But we are talking about the deaths of 768 people. Now, when there were 4 deaths in relation to the Pink Bat scheme, there was a royal commission. We know that the federal government will not have a proper COVID inquiry. They will not look into the role of the states. They will not have public hearings where the people whose family members were forced to die alone because of the decision-making process of our state leaders. Instead, it's done in secret. 2 of the 3 people backed in the COVID lockdowns, and of course it will all just be an excuse to blame the former government about the issues that are the responsibility of the federal government. But the state government failures remain massive. This was what the council assisting, what version of a COVID inquiry took place in Victoria. It was obvious, it was absolute, it was as plain as day that not only the world's longest lockdown, but 768 people died because of the failures of the Victorian government in the way they set up hotel quarantine.
One only needs to pause and to reflect on those figures to appreciate the full scope of devastation and despair occasioned as a result of the outbreaks. This was a program which failed to meet its primary objective.
And you remember, at that inquiry set up by the Victorian government, and not having the full powers like a royal commission, they were able to give the same answer over and over again. They were simultaneously the most powerful people in the state, but the most clueless people at the commission.
I can't specifically recall.
I can't recall. I presume I did.
I don't recall the conversation.
And I have some memory, but not full memory.
I don't recall specifically.
Now, in Victoria, the same people who couldn't recall passed legislation that if you were the director of a company where on a building site someone died because of safety negligence, that you would be held personally responsible. Even though you don't get your hands dirty, you don't go to the site, the conditions under which you have set up, you will be held responsible. Now, we know that politically nothing happened to the Victorian government, but the same organisation that would bring the charges against a private company to hold you to account if something went wrong on a building site and you were a director of a company of a building site, these were the same people who had launched a series of charges not against individuals but against the health department in Victoria. Today we learn that those charges have now been dropped. There will be no accountability for anyone at any level about their actions, their decisions, their choices that killed 768 fellow Victorians, fellow Australians. You want to know why people don't trust government? You want to know why accountability is something that is deeply lacking in the systems that exist? Well, have a listen to the reason why the charges have been dropped.
The Office of Public Prosecution scrapped the case after evidence was ruled out because it had already been aired in the hotel quarantine inquiry. The exclusion of that evidence substantially weakened the prosecution case.
It's almost like they planned it. You have an inquiry that doesn't work like a royal commission, where the ministers are able to go in and say, I know nothing. The Commission says that a series of decisions, but we can't say exactly by who, ended up the wrong people, the wrong setup, and an explosion of COVID cases that went on to kill almost 800 people, yet no one held responsible. And the idea that the reason no one can be held responsible is because the evidence has already been aired in another inquiry that seemed to let all of the people who made the decisions off the hook. That is an extraordinary finding as to why these charges, which again would not result in a former premier or former politician or current politician going to jail. It wouldn't have even resulted in the heads of department or the former chief health officer. It would have just been a finding against the department as a whole. So accountability. Now, I, like everyone else, want to put those years behind us. But you can't do that when as many people died as they did as a result of the decisions that were made by people. Yet to show you just how broken the system of accountability is in Australia, but specifically in Victoria, the things like the Ombudsman or the former boss of IBAC had talked about grey corruption, where everyone who's supposed to be the frank and fearless public servants just end up giving the political advice that the politicians want to hear because the politicians are in a powerful position to reappoint everyone in the system. And when one party ends up in power for as long as Labor has been in Victoria, as long as Labor has been in Queensland, then everyone knows not to rock the boat. Yet the family members who don't have people with them anymore are changed forever. The idea that decisions are made by people, the deaths did not happen in other states, the outbreaks did not happen in other states to the magnitude that took place in Victoria. Yet if it was a private company that was responsible for mistakes that ended up leading to almost 800 people dying, the company would be out of business, its directors probably would end up in jail, and certainly human beings would be held accountable. But because these people were part of the machine, they haven't just not been held accountable, they've gone on to bigger and better things. Martin Pakula was the minister whose department signed the $30 million contract with the security guards in a very fast process that has plenty of questions around it. He left the Parliament and he is now the chair of the Australian Grand Prix. Lisa Neville was the police minister. She's gone on to become the chairperson of a regional area of health in Victoria. Martin Foley, who was the health minister. Well, he has been rewarded with a position as the chair of the Melbourne Arts Precinct Corporation. All of these are government jobs. So do your bit in the Parliament, do your bit in the inquiry, and we'll do our bit for you in your post-politics. Jenny Mikakis, who was a former health minister, who Daniel Andrews tried to blame for the failures of hotel quarantine. She quit the Parliament, she lashed out at Daniel Andrews, and we can't work out what she's doing now. But she's definitely not sitting in any of the positions that the bloke who signed the security contracts, the person who was in charge of a police force that went and saw pregnant women in the morning, the health minister, James Merlino, who was at one point the Deputy Premier, and also, while Daniel Andrews was flat on his back, he announced extra lockdowns just to be safe, ones that weren't needed. He, of course, has now been given a job as the chairperson of the Suburban Rail Loop. Yet again, Victorian taxpayers. And ultimately, Daniel Andrews, the captain of the ship, the man who couldn't recall in the inquiry, who sat in National Cabinet, who knew that Victoria was doing what other states were not doing, that resulted in, according to that inquiry, the death of 768 people, has a pension for life for up to $300,000. Oh, and he has a driver as well. Accountability matters. It should, of course, as always, be swiftly delivered at the ballot box. It wasn't at the last election. But more importantly, the family members of each and every one of 768 people deserve to see that someone suffered other than them. And somebody didn't suffer out of revenge, they were held accountable for their actions. So the next time somebody wants to tell you that the reason people don't trust government is because of far right-wing conspiracies, tell them about this story. Point them to the idea of the lack of accountability. How the federal government chose not to have an inquiry that would hold the states to account, and even the last standing consequences of the government were blown away because the evidence had already been raised at a committee of their choosing. We've spoken for a few days now about the Prime Minister sending a woman into tears after she had organised a rally against domestic violence. You know that the Prime Minister's people have run around and tried to get everyone to look at the film, and somehow it absolves him of what you can see as the reaction of the organiser who called him a liar. I've said many times before that I think that what we've seen in his behaviour since and on that day tells us about his true character. Rather than saying sorry to the lady involved, instead, he went for one of the worst tropes when you disagree with women, to blame emotion.
It was an emotional day for people, and I get that.
And when that wasn't good enough and sorry would be a simple word, oh no, he couldn't do that.
Look, with regard to Sarah, I wish her well. I wish her well. People can see the video for themselves. They can see what people said and what people didn't say.
Now, amazingly, a couple of days out, it feels like we remain the lone wolf that is still willing to pay attention to what the Prime Minister had to say. But interestingly, there was an opinion piece which popped up from one of the lovies who finds a way to try to let Albo off the hook, but not before Annabelle Crabb makes this point. Albanese was so desperate to prove that he cares about gendered violence. By the way, do you like it's not domestic violence anymore? We're changing it now to gendered violence. That he forgot one thing. If you're a proper leader, it's not about you. The world is full of imponderables at the moment. And for Australian women, you can add a new one to the list. How long is it going to take for us to get a Prime Minister whose response to reasonable female anger isn't to trip spectacularly over his own tackle? The footage of Anthony Albanese attempting to cope with the febrile environment outside Parliament House on Sunday's domestic violence rally is nearly unwatchable. And because the video is so bad, this is my words now, because the video is so bad, that's why the media have stopped showing it to you, have stopped playing it on a loop in the fashion of which they would have if it was Tony Abbott or if it was Scott Morrison who had made the organiser of the rally cry. Well, I say I feel like a lone wolf, but I know there's some people here in prime time who talk about it, and I am indebted to my friend and my colleague, Andrew Clennell, who decided to ask the Prime Minister about this situation today at a press conference when he was coming out and giving the details of what National Cabinet had decided when it came to domestic violence. But what you are about to see is a bully in full action here, because while Andrew Clennell's question is one that he formulated on his own, and you cannot force Andrew to ask a question he doesn't want to ask, and I have never tried, he asked this question.
Could you have handled that interaction a bit better in retrospect?
But you see, just as when it was Peter Credlin who was asking questions of Daniel Andrews during the COVID days, all of the rest of the media takes a step back. The spin doctors in and around the Labor leader try to pretend that it's only one organisation that is even noticing this as a problem on the very same day that even Annabelle Crabb says that the footage is almost unwatchable. This is the response of a Prime Minister with a very, very thin glass jaw.
You put that, you haven't put what was said beforehand, which is I was asked to have discussions with people unknown about whether it was appropriate, whether we would be speaking or not. I responded to that. I mean, I was happy to speak, happy to not speak. I think the video before then as well clearly indicates what the view was over whether that was appropriate or not. I think today...
What did that show? Excuse my ignorance.
Well, you can look at it. You work at Sky.
Do you love that? Now, the issue that the rally was about, that the Prime Minister met about today, is more important. But isn't it amazing how the media does everything to protect the people they like, and it shows you that when they create and amplify the scandals around the people that they don't like, that it's nothing to do with principle. It's only to do with political narrative as opposed to the news of the day. Now, amazingly, the Prime Minister, of course, turns around, makes it all about Sky News, and no doubt Media Watch will bang in that nail next Monday night. Forever in universities, it will be taught that we did the wrong thing as opposed to the Prime Minister doing the wrong thing, because that's the way it works. But amazingly, in a press conference about something as serious as the National Cabinet was today, and as consequential as the Prime Minister's failure to apologise to the lady who's now gone to ground as a result, in part, of the online bullying that his supporters have set upon her, somebody decided that at that occasion this was a question that they should ask the Prime Minister, and rather than just saying, thank you, but not today, he actually answered it.
Oh, look, you know, Andrew, different one, Jason, JD, Demetrio, I think, put in an extraordinary effort as coach of South. He's a very decent man, and it would have been a tough day for him yesterday, but I wish him all the very best.
Really? A question about the sacking of the South Sydney coach because he's the Super South... OK, I get it. You want him to make a comment at some point. Is that the moment really to ask? Is that the moment really to respond But you see, for Albo, he sees, OK, so Clonell's going to ask me about the rally. All right, I'll sort of just say it's a Sky News thing and it'll only stay there. Oh, a question about the bunnies. OK, I'll answer that because that'll spread further. See how it works? It's just a perfect example about that concept of accountability to extend from where we were at the start of the show. As for the actual announcement that was made today after the National Cabinet, I'll be honest, while the immediate financial support for people trying to leave relationships is good, the rest of it is band-aids and BS. But the media, lead story, it was.
Canberra's billion-dollar lifeline to save women from domestic violence, and not a second too soon.
The Prime Minister pledges almost $1 billion to help women fleeing domestic violence.
The federal government pledges almost $1 billion to help combat domestic violence, including money to help women flee.
Firstly, the billion-dollar bit. It's about $930 million, but the more important thing, it's over 5 years. It's over 5 years. It's way less than 200. It's close to $150 million a year for the next 5 years. Now, again, I do not dispute the extra cash that's in there, the stuff that's in the package, $5,000 payment to give people the resources to be able to set up another house somewhere else. That's a good idea. There's also apparently some extra money that'll be given to them. If we can get the graphic up, that'd be great, guys. Which is also they're going to trial an age limit on access to pornography. There's a ban on deep fake pornography. This is where you're able to put someone's face on top of an existing actress. There's also a plan for more meetings, more talking about state and police ministers and attorneys general getting together. That's it. Now, there's been so much advice and so many reports and a royal commission in places like Victoria that you would think that when the government gets everyone together, all the states in one place at one time, they would be able to press the go button and do a lot more than that. And as many people have pointed out, in the $5,000 payment, this would be good in terms of getting maybe to a hotel room, but it's not good in terms of being able to pay for a rental bond and finding a rental place because, as we've talked about before, in part because of the decisions of this government to flood the joint with people from overseas in the past couple of years, that there are now fewer places for struggling people to be able to go to rent, let alone somebody who needs to leave the house yesterday to set up somewhere else. But the Prime Minister, as always, tries to find a way just to add it on with a trowel. And I truly have no idea what he means when he says this.
I'll be satisfied when a parent says the same thing to their daughter that they say to their son when they go out at night. Not how you're getting home from the train station, how you're getting home from the bus stop, not stay safe.
Now, the idiocy of this statement is if you actually go and have a look at the statistics, in terms of people who have been the victims of assault, women are far more likely to know the person who is assaulting them. So the idea of these random attacks, while of course obviously they happen, they're all disgraceful, but the reality is that for men, the number is way higher that they don't know their assailant to be attacked in public. Now, if the Prime Minister is talking about people in their relationships at home, the numbers are on his side. But I have no idea what he was just trying to add on top of the conversation. But it's not just me who thinks that all of this, again, was just a lot of BS and band-aids. David Crowe, who, remember, has written in that newspaper that the polling is so amazing that he's on his way to a second term. He's very much of the Albo team. And he says that the outcome of National Cabinet on Wednesday was another step towards a solution, but it's not a step change with a truly powerful response. And he's right, because there was an opportunity today for the state leaders and the Prime Minister and the territory leaders to all do what has been done in the past. We know that history shows us that after Port Arthur, John Howard was able to do a deal with every single state and territory leader to pass exactly the same legislation, word for word, about guns in this country. It means there is no difference between Tasmania and Western Australia about guns. New South Wales and Queensland. You name the pick. You pick the state, I should say. I apologise. Here's what they should have done today. There should have been a national agreement to form legislation that will be passed in every state in the country, that if a person has a history of violent offences towards their partner or a previous partner, that when they are accused of domestic violence, there is no option for bail. None. That would have saved many lives of the women who have lost their lives in the past 12 months, let alone 20 years. The decision to unify the country around no option for bail for somebody who has form. That would have been action. Instead, money, good but not enough. A war on misogyny online and banning deepfake pornography was what they came up today. And on top of that, the Prime Minister completely merged two issues together while taking questions about the coach of the South Sydney Football Club. Quick break, back with more. Lots to talk about, no sooks, no lefties. Bronwyn Bishop, I can't wait to see what she has to say about the Prime Minister's performance in the past couple of days. Lisa Goddard joins us as well. And Megyn Kelly from the United States. A lot to get to. Let's do it straight away, now, on Paul. Before we get into another edition of No Sooks, No Lefties, and it's Ladies' Night tonight, we'll get to that in a moment or two's time. Megyn Kelly, particularly good about the nutty protesters. We'll get to that in a second. Another person who's a great friend of ours, a lady who I believe in very much, is the wonderful Nicole Flint. And Nicole Flint today was formally announced as the candidate for the seat of Boothby, of course, the one that she represented in the Parliament oh so well. And she had a perfect line today about why she's back.
December, I finally found medication that has literally changed my life. So I'm running again because my health is on track, but the nation isn't. Australians are not better off under the Albanese Labor government. Australians are suffering. My community is suffering. The cost of living crisis is affecting families, households, and it is really hitting our small businesses very, very hard.
Go get them, darling. And she's got a message for the bullies. Don't even bother this time, because she is in a much better space and a much stronger place. She would be an excellent member for Boothby, as she was in the past. If you're in a seat, back her all the way. None other than Bronwyn Bishop is here, and Lisa Goddard as well from Queensland. Bronwyn, good line from Nicole today, wasn't it?
Excellent line. She pinpointed what had been the problem before for her, fixed, pinpoints the problem for the nation, not fixed.
Yeah, correct. By the way, Lisa, what would the media reaction be if Scott Morrison had answered a question about his football team after a national cabinet meeting about domestic violence? I just want to double-check what the reaction to Albo answering a question about his football team will be. Just where I could find that on Radio National Breakfast tomorrow.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Look, I've been watching the coverage over the past few days and thinking there is no way on God's given earth that Morrison would have been given the pass that Albanese has been given after that rally on the weekend. So the media have just basically largely turned a blind eye to it.
Oh, what a surprise. They like all of the access, the new broom, not to mention agreeing with the stuff that's going on. But Bronwyn, let's deal with this here again. The line of behaviour from the Prime Minister from Sunday to today, now even if benefit of the doubt, there's some level of confusion in and around the moment. When you've made the organiser cry, you just say sorry. Instead, no, I wish her well, the footage proves me right, sets the bullies in and around her, ostracises anyone who asks him about it today. The full Dan Andrews today we got was when Andrew Clennell asked a question. That's just a Sky thing.
How many times have I said, I sat in that chamber with that man for 20 years and nobody said he was leadership material. This just proves it. He's a nasty little shallow man and he can't cop it if he's not being eulogised. That's the bottom line. Unless he's being lapped up to and praised and say, aren't you wonderful and everybody loves you, he acts like a petulant child. And he really is a disgrace. I mean, the whole way he is conducting the Prime Ministership is making it look like an office that you wouldn't want to hold, because there's no authority, there's no standout on the things that really matter. He won't take a stand on anti-Semitism. He won't take a stand on what has happened to Mrs. Simons in Perth. My thoughts are with her friends and family. What about her? And what thoughts?
Correct.
What thoughts? You're causing me grief because my ministers are getting beaten up. He is an absolutely appalling little man.
Because to me, Lisa, I mean, again, part of your skill set is the ability to advise people about what to do when there's a pile-on or they've done something wrong, all the rest of it, right? Crisis comms 101, right? Apologise.
Yep.
Yet there seems to be a certain breed of politician, and we see this in Victoria in relation to the hotel quarantine stuff that I discussed at the start of the show. We see this, I believe, in the case of the Labor Party in Victoria. Again, there have been plenty of examples of Libs at the time, but last time I checked, they were only one state government. So let's focus on who's in charge now. I don't see strength in the response. I see a weakness of character, but I'll always mark his homework hard. How are you going to mark it?
Well, do you know what I saw? I saw media strategy. So I watched what happened at the DV rally and the response that he had from that. And mind you, have you looked on social media and what's running around? I don't have TikTok, but people keep sending me TikToks. And he's a meme. People are laughing at him and they are appalled at his behaviour. So his credibility has been shot if you look at what's being fed out across social media. But back to this media strategy. So he's copped it over his performance at the rally. So then he's gone off to the Northern Territory, hoping, I would suspect, to turn the media dial and turn the attention onto what he was doing in the NT, but it didn't work successfully. So call me cynical, but then today we have the big announcement about DV. That has, and you just played earlier in the show tonight, the clippings from all the news bulletins, which is with billion-dollar announcement. So it's worked to a degree, but I think it's all been planned out. It's all been planned to try and move that media narrative along because he is absolutely in damage control. And he should be.
Well, exactly. And Bronwyn, this is the thing. In relation to, again, there was an opportunity today for all the people who run everything in the country, right, to be in the same room at the same time and do what had been done on guns post Port Arthur. The idea of saying, all right, bugger this, we're all going to unite our information systems, we're all like actual commitments. And in my view, somebody who has form denied bail. That's what I wanted out of this meeting. I'm pleased that there's some money, but again, I can have my argument that it's not enough and it's a bit of a band-aid. What do you think?
Well, I watched the wind-up of that meeting and it quite clearly had all been pre-planned. Each minister who spoke read it out. Those speeches would have been written at least the day before, if not a few days before. It was just a stage-managed exercise to try and say, look at me, I really do care. Well, I'm afraid he doesn't. I mean, the statistics say that when a woman actually decides to leave and actually does it and seeks an AVO, that is the most dangerous time for her.
100%.
And yet, all right, he's up to $5,000. It's $1,500 here to go and get a hotel room, and you can get a $3,500 for something else if our bureaucrats approve it. I mean, how practical is that?
Correct.
It was a great statement. Here's $1 billion I'm going to throw at it. But there was no compassion for the women who were affected.
Well, but again, I don't know if we can bring back the grab that I played where he's making the comment about, you know, the gender equality and all that stuff that was sort of, again...
It was words. It had nothing to do with trying to fix the problem. Until that bail problem is fixed, and I'm sad to say, but we have to look at the quality of magistrates too. And I hate to say it, but we've got some women magistrates out there who are very soft, and it's not good. So we really have a big problem on our hands in that at the most vulnerable time, when they actually decide to go, that's when they need that protection.
Absolutely.
And that was exactly the position this poor woman who was murdered by that man. We also have to look at... No, she was murdered allegedly by that man.
Correct. Sorry, I apologise.
So what we're saying is that whereas delving in further, we know alcohol can be a problem. What about drugs?
Yeah.
And we have all these people who want to say, let's have more and more drugs in the community, what impact does ICE have on the behaviour of someone who really has it in for that woman? So there are many things like that, not even mentioned. Not even mentioned. It was just a stage-managed exercise which did nobody any good, in my view.
Well, I agree. And Lisa, I mean, again, we seem to have conversations that are running at 100 miles in the exact opposite direction, right? Where there are the people that there would be a particular level of cohort that is demanding action on this particular issue, and rightly so. But part of that cohort would also say, well, the age of criminal responsibility, that should go up to 14, and the decriminalisation of the possession of drugs, that should happen, and 17 chances. It's like instead, you've got to start at the start, not just at the end. But you were going to say something when Bronwyn was speaking then.
Well, yeah, I was going to say a few things. I was at an event and listened to the CEO of a Northern Territory shelter for women who are trying to escape violence. She said it usually takes about 7 attempts before they finally make that break and get to a shelter. And that's if the shelter isn't full or if they can find a shelter. I've got police friends who I spoke to tonight and said, give me the truth. You know, tell me what it's like out there. And they said, we can go to a domestic violence call, and if the woman chooses to leave, we often don't know where to take her. The shelters are full. We make the phone calls. If it's the middle of the night, there is no one to pick up the telephone call. So then they've got to rely on trying to help them get to family or friends, and then they're easily found, right? So what this announcement does today is, sure, it gives Albanese a huge big figure to run around on the front page of the papers with or across the 6 o'clock news. But when you have people like the Domestic Violence New South Wales CEO on Sky this afternoon saying, we are disappointed. 100%. It doesn't go far enough. 100%. What are we doing about shelters? What are we doing about prevention? What are we doing about support workers? Start putting money into that and stop it being such a fractured offering of services. You've got so many different people trying to do good, but it doesn't seem to be streamlined. That's where the focus needs to be. I think, look, it's great. Anything that they can do to help people who are trying to escape domestic violence, fantastic. It needs to be done. But there is so much more.
But also, you know, I mean, and in between all of this week, $1 billion for the quantum computer and it just all of this stuff. And again, remember, that number of $1 billion, divide by 5. That's the actual number that's coming in per year. But again, we make the number as big as possible, all the rest. Now, I want to move on to a bit of a speed round, not because we could not discuss that issue forever, but I want to give people a little bit of relief from it, as important as it is. A bunch of economists are starting to say we need to increase the dole because the number is so low, and what is left of a cold, dead heart bleeds a little. And it makes some sense to me that not forever, but maybe for the first 6 months, that the dole is a little bit higher. But I understand what the cost of that is to the budget, and the budget is already increasing on welfare expenditure at now 36%. What do you think, Bronwyn?
I think that to try and increase it will feed inflation.
Right.
And the costs will go up, which will negate any increase that they're given. This government is letting down the side. Inflation is homegrown. We know that now. There are no excuses. You can't blame international events. It is homegrown because of government policy and expenditure.
Correct.
The RBA, and I've said this again and again, the RBA only has one tool, and that is to put up interest rates, which hits mortgage holders.
Bloody oath.
And if those mortgage holders start to lose their jobs, which is what the Reserve Bank also says, and if you read other people's commentary today, stop having expenditure on your favourite coffee or your expenditure.
All the luxuries.
In other words, send those people broke so they go into unemployment so that the pressure will be less for inflation. What they're saying is punish the people for what the government is doing.
Correct.
It is the government's failure to rein in its expenditure
100%.
that is making the situation where inflation is growing. I've said once before, I can't tell you how many times I've said it. What is the point of having wages chase inflation when all that happens is you've got more money in your pocket and it buys less?
Yeah, very good.
And that's the situation we get into. You know, there was an expression that came out of many other things that Albanese has done, and Chalmers also, you know, the liar in the lodge. There is too many examples of it, and it really has to come right home to Albanese, who is supposed to be leading the government.
Great point.
He can't lead anything.
I'm with you completely. Goodness, that's why we love you here. Carry over, champ, as always. Lisa, last one here again, as we try to lighten the mood here before we get into Megyn Kelly, and it'll be a fun one with her in a moment or two's time. Travel writer, writing, I think, in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age today, Brisbane Times as well. I like this idea. Can we get rid of those little passenger cards whenever you fly back into the country? I want to get rid of them because the writing is so small and my eyesight ain't at what it used to be. What do you think?
It's always finding the pen. That's always the difficulty. Yeah. They never give out the pens. But and that when you're juggling children, it's always the partner who also wants your pen. But you know what I love doing with these stories is looking at what the comments are online. And the best one by far was something, you know, they ask you for what your occupation is, and the argument was, well, why do they need to know? And this person said, middle-aged man said, I always write stripper or pole dancer and then watch for the reaction, because what are they going to do? And I thought that was great.
Correct. I also like where they still have the question there. You know, certainly when you go into America, the version of it, were you part of the Nazi Party before 1945? How many people are left that are flying commercial? Anyway, well, thank you. All right, thank you, ladies. Do appreciate it. Quick break, back with more. The great Megyn Kelly in a moment or two's time here on Paul Murray Live. She's going to absolutely give it to those idiot protesters. Our favourite time of the week to talk to our favourite person in the world, the wonderful Megyn Kelly from the Megyn Kelly Show, Sirius XM, or you can find it on YouTube. How are you, Rockstar?
I am great. How are you?
So Donald Trump has now been fined about $9,000 for his breaking of the gag order, but the judge has said, you're going to go to jail if it keeps happening. Do you think this bloke actually has the stones to do it?
Good question. Yes, I do. He really doesn't like Trump. And I think he would do it because these lefties have themselves convinced that they're righteous and Trump's evil. And he's not going to let that get out of hand in his courtroom. And he's got to be one who imposes the rule of law, even though he's not doing that on the substantive charges against Trump. So I do think if Trump willfully defies him and continues attacking witnesses, he might get thrown in jail. And if that happens, he's going to win the election.
What do you think of the logic that if he spends an hour in jail, he definitely wins the election?
I just think taking the former president of the United States and throwing him behind bars in the New York City jail as a punitive measure because he fought back against witnesses who are disparaging him every day as he's running for president again with his Secret Service, by the way, to be incarcerated over like retweets, people will be incensed. I just think it's a bridge too far. If he gets incarcerated at all, I mean, on the substantive charges, we're going to have riots 100%. But if he's jailed before he gets convicted because he's having a war of words with somebody who's attacking him viciously every day, and this judge won't even impose a gag order that gags both of them? No, I just think that it'll underscore the gross unfairness of this whole thing in a way nothing else has.
Now, let's be honest about Donald. He is a bit in the courtroom, a bit fidgety and allegedly a little bit farty. Do you think he's actually put two and two together about how restrictive jail would be?
Did you say he's farty? I think you have to add allegedly. Where did it land? I stopped listening.
Fair point. I'm sorry. Do you think that Donald Trump has actually got it in his head that going to jail is not house arrest, it's going to jail, and it's not going to a hotel, it's not ordering anything, it's being told what to do all day, every day?
He's starting to get it because the judge said you're getting fined $9,000 and you need to delete the offensive posts in which he fought back against witnesses who are attacking him by 2:00 today. And he did it. He waited until the last second, but he did delete the posts. So he is starting to comply with the judge's orders, which is smart, but he has very little impulse control when it comes to rhetorical battles. So if history is any guide, he will not stop criticizing them. And I think no way have we seen the last chapter of Trump violating the gag order, that storyline. Now, I think Trump would understand if he went to jail for contempt, it would be for a day or two. So it's worth it. I think it would rally so many people behind him. It's basically 2 days in a bedroom with your Secret Service next door. I think it would drive him nuts. He doesn't like to be told what to do, but I think it's worth it.
Today, police finally cleared out the university protest at Columbia. Now, what do you think of these little revolutionaries and champagne socialists?
Why are they all so unattractive? These things are not unrelated. I'm telling you, attractive, smart people don't behave like this. They're out there living their thriving, successful lives, raising their families, going to jobs, being the creators and the innovators and the engines of their economies. They're not going on college campuses angry and bitter because, again, C.1. That's why. One of these morons leading the protests on Columbia's campus actually went out there to criticize the administration for not allowing them to bring in food supplies because they're depriving them of humanitarian aid. She used that term, humanitarian aid. They're basically just like the prisoners in the Gaza tunnels. Really, that's what they're going through right now because they can't get unlimited cupcakes. Hello, sister, you don't need it. And they're being deprived of their civil rights as they overtook an academic building and I guess want, I don't know, pizza brought in, lattes. I'm not sure how far it should go.
All right, quick one before you go. Kamala Harris, awful. Drew Barrymore, awful. Get them together, over the top and cringe, right?
I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. Yeah. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
Oh, yes, your mother's laugh. She's so weirdly close. She's breaking weird boundaries. I almost felt sorry for Kamala Harris. It was like, Drew, back in your lane. Give her some breathing space. You're acting very strangely. And then there's Kamala Harris, like, trying to lean into the Oprah, like, I have a big laugh. They make fun of my laugh. I have my mother's laugh. Oh, your mother. And then Drew's like, what we really need is a mamala. We need a mamala. Because that's what Kamala Harris's stepkids call her. Literally, there's not a single soul in America that needs a mamala or wants a mamala or looks at Kamala Harris in that way. The Republicans obviously can't stand. The Democrats can't stand her. That's why we spent the better part of the last year talking about how we could get her off of the Democratic ticket. No one wants a mamala. What does she say? So the whole thing is this disgusting, artificial. It's like one of those disgusting protein shakes where you can taste the chemicals as you're downing it. Like, it's all false and it's supposed to be good for you, but you know you're causing yourself cancer sip by sip. That's how I felt when I watched those clips.
I hope I'm not too close to you now, Megyn. See you next week, darling.
Goodbye.
Before we go, strength and love to the Premier of New South Wales, Chris Minns. He lost his dad today. John was a school teacher, we learned today. He was just 72. Some beautiful photos which are out, and no doubt he was very proud to see his son become the Premier. But I also just wanted to say strength and love to everyone who's dealing with a family member that maybe you have lost or you're about to lose or you're at hospital or life is going to be very different than what you expect it to be. So again, strength and love to everyone who's watching us, having a tough time. We're always here for you each and every night, same time, 9 o'clock Eastern or online at skynews.com.au. Big one tomorrow night. Looking forward to it with winners and losers of the week. You jump onto the socials to make those decisions. And standing by in what is none other than an incandescent rage, James McPherson with the Late Debate.